What's up, Bitcoiners? How are you doing? The sun is clearly up, and I checked. Bitcoin's running. We're totally good. We're in the clear. We can have our coffee and talk about all the fake news, all the stuff that's important and maybe not. Lots of stuff going on, though. You know how I like to start the show with the fakest news I could find, and what out there is just so nuts that I don't even have to add a punchline. I don't even have to add a punchline to some of these, right? Just saying the actual facts and the news is funny. It's just funny. So Taylor Lorenz, if you don't know who Taylor Lorenz is, she's a journalist with WAPO Journalist. I mean, that's maybe generous. She writes a lot of incendiary pieces and is one of the people who triggers conservative people, right-wing people, or whatever you want to call it, more than almost anyone. She has a real ability to get under people's skin for a million reasons, but this is probably one of the most obvious. So everything going on in China, everything going on in Twitter, and she's taken real offense to Elon Musk changing the Twitter misinformation COVID policy, basically that he wasn't going to be policing any kind of misinformation any longer about COVID on Twitter. So she wrote an article in the New York Times suggesting, so the point here is that because America hasn't used the Chinese zero lockdown approach today, she's talking about today, that actually we don't care and we're letting millions of people die in America. That's her argument, that because we didn't follow the Chinese system, millions of people are dying. We should have been more capable of protecting the vulnerable, as she says, right? It's a critical flaw, is her argument. So everyone, of course, just getting so triggered. Everyone losing their minds. It's pretty funny stuff. So here's Melissa Chen saying, Taylor Lorenz has stated her views very clearly. She's totally for China's brutal zero COVID policy, regardless of the human and economic costs. She's also very much a TikTok evangelizer. Interesting how she doesn't hold a single opinion that's remotely critical of the CCP. Now, remember, we've been talking a lot about how TikTok is somewhat related to the Chinese government in the sense that they could basically make any idea proliferate in America if so chosen. So whenever you hear this argument about TikTok, that it's a data security thing, it's a scam. It has nothing to do with data security. That has nothing to do with the threat that TikTok poses. The threat TikTok poses is stuff like Taylor Lorenz, where you have an instance where you can enter someone's conversation, enter their mind, essentially, give them a piece of information, and you can focus attention that way. You don't hear a lot of fentanyl talk on American TikTok, do you? Not even a little bit. You hear a lot of other stuff, not fentanyl, which some people say is the biggest problem in America. Other people say that the Chinese government is involved in the fentanyl problem. So you don't hear anything about fentanyl on TikTok. One of the biggest orange pills you can take on fentanyl is to go, taking an orange pill on fentanyl. One of the biggest orange pills you can take on the media, TikTok and China, is going to look at the TikTok that the Chinese children get. It's not the same TikTok that American children get, right? There aren't a lot of, you ever see this thing on TikTok? I don't have TikTok at all, so I only go from what I hear on the outside. It's never touched my phone, and it never will. But I do follow the stories, and I do have some impression. Now, I don't know if this is true, but people have shared on Twitter that on TikTok, they see an abnormal amount of obese people doing the dances, talking about this stuff, and they're obese, and it's no big deal, and they're beautiful, and it's great. Now, remember, on this show, we never fat shame. We are not interested in fat shaming. We think being obese just means you got unlucky in the addiction you got, which is food, and it's really hard to handle, and so it's nothing but empathy on this show. So I don't want to make this at all about laughing at fat people dancing on TikTok. That's not what I'm trying to do, right? But that there are this many of them, that it is this promoted, that the algorithm seems to surface this stuff pretty regularly and sort of makes it okay and doesn't talk about the health effects at all, is one of the things people criticize TikTok for, and that's sort of out there. So there you go. Eli Klein mentioned this about Taylor Lorenz's article in the Washington Post as well, and he says, Taylor Lorenz's entire Twitter feed is full of COVID misinformation she authored and COVID misinformation from wackos she retweets. That the Washington Post let her write this article is just nuts. So I continue to think the Washington Post uses her just for engagement. It's just enragement, engagement. And I can't see any benefit of the way she writes, what she brings to the table, but maybe I'm blind, right? I'll just get to some of these comments. Morning, CK. Morning, Bitcoin Graffiti. CK reminds us, remember to share the show with a loved one. Indeed, we want the show to continue to grow. Share with everyone. Everyone should come. But numbers are growing. We're doing well. I'm happy. We could be doing better. Justin, good morning. Dex, good morning. Danielle Renault, good morning. Justin says, we need to protect the vulnerable at the expense of literally every other person. Okay, yeah, that's what's, that's it. Justin also says, I agree that we shouldn't laugh at them, but I believe it is harmful to allow them to claim that being fat can be healthy. That's exactly what I'm getting at, right? I never want to fat shame, but I never want to get into this world where we're saying it's beautiful, it's healthy, that it's extremely dangerous to be down that road. And TikTok is doing it. So that's kind of what I'm saying, right? I don't want to fat shame. I don't want to laugh. I have nothing but empathy, right? I'm lucky I didn't get addicted to that and didn't have any compulsion to be addicted to those things. But everyone knows what addiction looks like, right? Everybody knows what it looks like. So just be thankful that you didn't get the one that was really bad for you. It's as bad as heroin, right? Sugar and all this stuff. I think we're going to find out more in the next few years, not even in a long time. We're going to find out more just about how addiction in food was manipulated in order to do all kinds of nefarious things. But we're not there yet, right? We're not there yet. We're starting to uncover and understand, but not quite there. Did anyone have a chance to see this gold ad, these World Gold Council ads? They're really good. They're really good. They've got one here where it's called Big Coin, right? Big Coin. And they've got, you know, really typical sort of crypto people. They're all trying to like pump the big coin with each other and everything. So, I mean, it's pretty cool when gold advertisements actually work for Bitcoiners. I mean, that's what I see. I see gold giving Bitcoin ads. I mean, just because it rhymes big coin and Bitcoin doesn't mean anyone out there is necessarily confusing them. Now, I understand a lot of people think crypto, Bitcoin, same thing, but that's the great news about the SBF thing and the FTX thing. It's just proliferating the division in everyone's mind and contrasting crypto and Bitcoin and, you know, crypto plus fiat culture and Bitcoin. So that's great news, right? We can't deny that things are going well on that level. Let me go back to China and Taylor Lorenz for a second. So one of the things we can tell when we try and find truth in all of this stuff. So I've used this graph a few times. This is called the pre-suasion infograph that I've created. This is a pre-suasion. This is about astroturfing and making people believe a thing before it's confirmed, right? This is how fake news proliferates. This is how the system operates. And it starts with these privileged moments here, right? A privileged moment. So in the case of TikTok, the privileged moment is generated by the algorithm and tells you what to say. In the case of the New York Times, it's just sitting down and reading the newspaper. That's the privileged moment, right? Or the Washington Post or whatever. And the CCP, obviously, the Communist Party of China, does a lot of this because they control all the media in the country. So they're able to weave the net pretty well. But this piece here is where you can start to identify where fake news enters the system. And I'll show you the trick. The trick is between the privileged moment and the focused illusion. So that's what happens next, right? The privileged moment and the focused illusion, there's often a hallucination, a thing added to the situation that helps steer it, bring meaning. In the case of TikTok, it's always this data security thing, right? You can also call it a decoy, right? That you get people to argue about the wrong thing, right? But nevertheless, this is something that's mildly true, right? The data security is sort of just like all the other apps, right? We need some data security and blah, blah, blah. But that's the focused illusion, right? The hallucination is this is the major problem. This is the thing you have to worry about. What that hallucination affords is that we forget about the brainwashing aspects of TikTok. So it's a major problem. And you're seeing this hallucination work its way through the entire system. So even look at Taylor Lorenz for a second, right? So Taylor Lorenz admiring the Chinese situation. Well, during the protests that are simultaneously going on in China, the authorities told the people, go home and watch the World Cup, go home and watch soccer. Don't worry about this protest thing, right? Well, if you would have gone home to watch soccer, had you gone home to watch soccer, you would have found, in China, only in China, you would have found this. People have been sharing the Chinese World Cup feed compared to the European World Cup feed, and the Chinese World Cup feed omits all broadcast of the crowds. It never shows anyone enjoying life not masked. It has even gone so far as to digitally alter images to put masks on people, a hallucination, right? Forcing people to hallucinate that in Europe, they are still struggling, or in this case, Qatar, still struggling with COVID to the point where people are wearing masks. Of course, there are no masks in the stadium. Qatar, I think, is more or less like America now, where we don't really care about COVID. No one gives a shit anymore, and other than Taylor Lorenz. Now, I understand there's still vulnerable people who are worried, and they can stay home. It's now moved to the point where folks are managing their own individual risk in Europe, in America, in Qatar, or wherever else. It's not all over the world, and it's certainly not in China, where the zero COVID policy continues to cause protests, cause issues. But it's that hallucination piece that I want to underline, because it's the act of putting in information which wasn't there before that allows people to start having a sort of causality in their mind. It helps them start painting a picture about what is actually going on that starts on a false premise, right? And the case of SBF is probably the best one we've ever seen where this is happening, right? So right away, you've got Good Morning America. They've got an interview with SBF now, right, this morning. Good George Stephanopoulos. If you don't know who George Stephanopoulos is, well, here's who he is. He was Bill Clinton's chief of staff for many years in the 1990s. His position as ABC News anchor was actually sort of one of these tit for tat inside baseball things, where he went from the White House directly to the news and had to face a million questions about his objectivity, all that stuff. And of course, he's never really answered to it, right? He's always been sort of a Bill Clinton guy, and that's fine. I'm not a, Bill Clinton. I mean, we're not here to talk about Bill Clinton. We're just here to talk about someone who came from the edifice and is now helping shape messaging. So he was part of this. We had Andrew Ross Sorkin yesterday, who's part of it. And both of these guys use these occasions to, first of all, have the privileged moment. The privileged moment in the case of George Stephanopoulos is even more interesting. So it turns out that this morning's advertisement is being, this morning's show is being advertised. It's being sponsor ad on promoting it on Twitter. We complain about people not using Twitter advertisements because of the problem that it could cause for Twitter going forward, and Elon and his stewardship of the company and his leadership of the company and all that stuff. So we've been talking about Apple not buying ads anymore. We've been talking about all that stuff, right? So we know there's been a concerted effort to choke advertising dollars, but here they are spending the money. And here's Alex Kaufman on a promoted sponsored ad from Good Morning America about the FTX show this morning. Alex Kaufman says, wait, let me get this straight. So Good Morning America, an MSN stalwart, just paid money to Twitter to promote a tweet for me to see, letting me know about the exciting interview Good Morning America is doing with SBF. Well, you just earned yourself a block on my blockchain GMA. Wow. And of course, this word embattled, right? So this has been getting a lot of comment all morning. Embattled, right? Embattled. Here's the focused illusion that we saw, right? New York Times has perpetrated it. Washington Post is perpetrating, or the Good Morning America is perpetrating it this morning. It's this idea that it was like, whoops, that somehow he was another one of these funds that just blew up and it was all risk management and they screwed up the risk management, and what are we going to do, right? They've never underlined the fiduciary needs. CoinDesk had an article this morning putting it straight, right? He goes, this is from no, this is not CoinDesk. Sorry, this is from David Z. Morris. I've got the CoinDesk article later. The article here says SBF interview is just staggeringly deceitful. He says he was surprised by the size of Alameda's margin losses, neglecting to mention it was FTX exempted, that it was FTX who exempted them from getting liquidated sooner. He talks about a run on the bank, neglecting to mention he wasn't a bank. This is a guy reared on utilitarian ethical philosophy who presented himself as deeply thoughtful about altruism, and he doesn't have the ethical intuition God gave a llama. Respect to Sorkin for, were you nervous about the company, or were you nervous you were going to get caught, right? That he actually asked that question. But nevertheless, there was a little bit of hard-hitting questions from Andrew Ross Sorkin, but not the real ones. It was all diversion, right? It was all the focused illusion, right? This is where the hallucinations start, right? That this was all just about risk management and running the engine too hot, and we took a little too much risk, and whoops, who knows, right? No mention of the actual frauds, no mention of stealing customer money or any of those things. We've got the article in CoinDesk today, FTX collapse was a crime, not an accident, is the headline. Francis Coppola, who is no fan of this industry, says takes a quote out of it, these attempts to frame the fallout obfuscate the core issue, the misuse of customer funds. Spot on. Of course, he had fiduciary duties. It's not just about performance as a trader and whoops apocalypse. It's about fiduciary duties that were completely neglected, like completely neglected. No one was even paying attention. So what do you get in the end? You get Bill Ackman, right? Call me crazy, but I think SBF is telling the truth. So you get more and more people saying, whoa, he's right. Kevin O'Leary yesterday. Oh, I don't mind that I've been criticized and my name has been dragged through the mud. I'd give this guy money again next time. He's going to come back from all this, right? So, and now we've got, we had the Tiffany Fong 2 nights ago, who was given an interview. She's been in this business for about 5 months as an interviewer. Then he gets 2 of the most important platforms you could imagine, which is the Deal Book thing with New York Times and now Good Morning America. These are huge platforms, right? So he persuades initially with the Tiffany Fong interview. Oh, I just did it myself. Now, after today, he's got an interview with Mario Nawfal, who I've been bringing up a bunch on the show. Mario's the fella who got Elon to jump into Spaces when this was all going on. He's the guy who got Hunter Biden on the phone, and then Hunter Biden jumped off because they were talking about this stuff. So this guy also has only been in the game for a few months now. I'm not trying to detract from the skills of these interviewers, but if you're not seeing a heavily managed and coordinated media campaign here, I don't know what to tell you. You don't just pick out 2 randos from nowhere with no industry experience and then find 2 top of the narrative type interviewers and that's who you went with, right? You know, all kinds of people have tried. Frank Chaparro, I saw on Twitter, saying, I've been trying to get an interview. I have chops as a crypto news person. I can handle this interview. Silence, right? Obviously, nothing has come back. And obviously, no one at Bitcoin Magazine has been asked to interview. No one from Bitcoin Magazine has been asked to interview SBF. You know, Dylan LeClaire is not, like, they're not calling him up and saying, you know, can you hold him to the fire with your forensic analysis of funds and the what you saw going on in the marketplace? Right? That's not happening, right? It's a bunch of feelings and a bunch of this and that, right? But again, it's helping pry folks out of the hallucination that is being forced upon them, right? So again, you can tell the difference in general between something that is closer to real and something that is fake by the hallucination. What I mean is, it's easy to miss something. If something has been omitted, right, and one person misses it, that's another story, right? That can happen. But if 2 people disagree about something and someone adds an extra piece to it, right, something is added, it's much harder for the mind to do. You can miss something, but adding detail, adding features to a story, right, those hallucinations are usually a tell. There's spin involved. Now let's just contrast it, right? You can see the exact same thing happening in China right now. Jiang Zemin, the president, died, right? The former president of China died. Now, what's been going on in China, I referred to it yesterday, the General Hostilities soap opera that China Uncensored has been running for a little while about President Xi and about former President Jiang Zemin. So former President Jiang Zemin was the president in the 90s and early 2000s and was there for the Hong Kong handover, Bill Clinton's presidency. His major contribution to China wasn't just we'll keep everything focused on economics and that's going to be great. Economic growth is going to be everything. He was known as the socialism with Chinese characteristics slogan. That was really his thing that he pushed while he was there. But no, that's not what he's really known for. What he's really known for is the crackdown on Falun Gong and the General Hostilities soap opera, quest for power situation that's been going on in China between Jiang Zemin and President Xi. He was the guy who died was the leader of what could be called an opposition faction, but not opposition, representing the people, really just who else is trying to get power. And most of his power came from a source that he left behind when he was president, which was the internal secret police that grab people off the streets and throw them into places we don't know. He created this infrastructure because he hallucinated and got the entire population to believe the hallucination that the Falun Gong, the religious practitioners, were some kind of dissident sect that needed to be destroyed. So he injected narrative into there, helped create a collective nation around the Falun Gong being political dissidents when they probably were slightly politically dissident, but it was a type of religion, right? And in the end, his infrastructure is what allowed the organ harvesting to begin, because he would arrest all these Falun Gong people and then they would be put into these supply chains. Is that the word we call it now? Supply chains, human supply chains. So that was him. And that internal police force allowed him to compete in power against the president Xi. But now that he died, in the midst of protests, there's a lot of confusion about how to handle his legacy, because they got to write these obituaries and they got to do all this kind of stuff. So a lot of people are saying, well, how are they going to handle this right now? Because they've got the protests, and this secret police force that they had looks like it's going to be engaged and is going to sort of solve some of their problems right now. I don't know what's going on in China, right? In the sense that I think the Chinese government, as what I see right now, can wait it out. I think they can wait it out. But if the people would just open their eyes to the power they have, I think it could be over really quickly. So we're in a weird spot here where it could end really quickly. I mean, we could have a totally different situation in China tomorrow. At the same time, the Chinese government has tools at its disposal that we can't even imagine. And one of them is this secret police. And now it looks like it's going to go towards President Xi. He's going to get control of an apparatus that he did not have control over. One of the last pieces of power in the country that he didn't have. And now that we're in this world where we're talking all about his legacy, here's the official description. It's a very important paragraph. All kinds of people breaking it down. But here's what they say. Comrade, and so all the newspapers have the same photo, very similar layout, and this paragraph is almost repeated in every newspaper today. So talk about privileged moments. Imagine you get to blanket every newspaper in your country with the same paragraph. So here's what it says. Comrade Jiang Zemin was an outstanding leader who had the utmost respect for our party, our military, our various peoples of our nation, a great Marxist, a great proletariat, a revolutionary politician, military expert, and diplomat, a tried and tested communist fighter, an outstanding leader of the great cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics, the core of the third generation of the party's collective leadership, and the main founder of the important thought of the three represents. So let's just talk about it quickly. So the first one, the outstanding leader part, that was copied from Deng Xiaoping. They all kind of get these same honorifics when they die. The fella who took over after Mao had that same frame, outstanding leader, right? Outstanding leader. But the primary act of framing here is the layouts and how identical they were, in order to make sure people have this consistent image of him, right? Jonathan Cheng in the Wall Street Journal writes, how Mr. Xi orchestrates paying tribute to Mr. Zhang while preventing him from becoming a symbolic cudgel against Mr. Xi's politics will be another challenge for Mr. Xi as China tries to manage rising coronavirus cases and an economic slowdown. Toad, we blamed you wrongly before. You're the ceiling, not the floor. In death, so basically, people now saying that this guy here, basically trying to avoid the idea that the new government ends up being tied in any kind of trouble that Jiang Zemin might attract his way now that he's dead, right? So anything like that that might actually attract this trouble, they're trying to kind of avoid, right? So again, this outstanding leader here, right? This is part of the focus delusion, right? Part of the focus delusion, because all of this infrastructure that they now have for COVID quarantine and all that actually comes from him. And it actually comes from him. He created the world where this can happen. So now they can't really let that logic get strung together, right? That this guy who died, now he's dead, all the stuff he left behind for, basically concentration camp type situations, they're not allowed to make the connection, right? You can't do that. So it's outstanding leader. So when we talk about the Falun Gong, right, the Falun Gong, that's the piece that allowed for the infrastructure for lockdowns to even be put in place in the first place, right? Their whole infrastructure to lock people down, weld doors, everything they have now that they've pivoted to this authoritarian, totalitarian state was instituted by Jiang Zemin originally, right? So in his death, it could be an occasion to revisit all the crazy policies he got going with his internal police, with his internal security system, right? So this internal security system is required by Xi at this moment. He can't, he's got to protect the legacy of that system from any connotations, negative connotations from this guy dying. So the instinct would be to use this occasion to separate himself, President Xi, from a rival and a different faction, but he can't. It's not possible. It's not possible given current conditions. So they've got to create a hallucination amongst the people, which they're not even sincere about, right? Xi hates this guy. I mean, he hates him, right? These are absolute enemies. So right now you've got them, with this focus delusion. And it's the same thing, right? We're seeing it in crypto regulations. So you get the New York Times, it was a run on the bank, embattled, oh, he's just in a crazy industry, it's so hard, right? And then right away, the assumed causality of everything is crypto risk. It's not fraud. It's not any of those other things. It's crypto risk. Just like outstanding leader, well, he dealt with the Falun Gong. Wow, he got rid of political dissidents, right? Don't forget there's 400 million communists in China that don't think Xi is Marxist and communist enough, right? There's 400 million people that are completely ideologically supportive of more extreme measures than anything that Xi has come up with until now. And certainly they were supporting Jiang Zemin this whole time because he's even more sort of chauvinist in this way, right? And so these guys, Xi needs them, right? You've got all these people protesting now. The only way he can really manage them is if he keeps that core group of people that believe in the narrative, that believe in the Chinese Communist Party, believe in the Chinese system. The only way to get them motivated is this way. Joe Weisenthal had a really good prediction yesterday on Odd Lots when he was talking about, and I like Joe, I like Joe. He can be a bit timid, let's say, but he's doing better now that he's got his own sort of space on Bloomberg. So Joe, in Odd Lots yesterday, talks about how the leadership and economic stress, the combination of the two, are leading to potentially major changes in China along the lines of what I said. And that's this, is that the regions, the provinces, the states are the ones enforcing all of these rules from Beijing. And the issue is they've already been embattled financially. The real estate collapse was how the states and the regions got their money. The real estate sector was how they got their money. But if you didn't know, in China right now, no one's paying their mortgage. Everyone is avoiding the real estate sector. It looks like it's completely fake at this point, and should collapse if they were allowed out of their houses. And so the municipalities, the regions, whoever is able to administer policy and lockdown controls are also financially responsible for them. So suddenly you have a scenario where the states have been impoverished because of the real estate failures. And now the states are spending more money keeping folks locked down. So what Joe argues here is that the interesting dimension that came is how the budget of enforcing COVID-0 often falls to local provincial governments, and those regional entities have their finances battered by the collapse in real estate. And the issue is, will it create any separation in space for central control and the provinces? We don't know, but it's an interesting little off-ramp that we might be able to enjoy. So the issue then is really just, follow the way this stuff works, right? Follow the way the myths, the narrative can be supported. It can be supported. You get this privileged moment. The illusion comes next. That's the hypnotism, right? That's the thing that wasn't there, that is added to the story, additive, right? So now you've got this extra piece, right? Outstanding leader, run on the bank. He's embattled. Oh, he's embattled, right? And then because of that, you actually can put someone on the wrong path. Now you can create the assumed causality. It engages the survival mechanisms. It's either new regulations for crypto, it's lockdowns, it's that kind of infrastructure. And then finally you get to cognitive closure, right? And this is where things come together, right? This is where the narrative ends up becoming crystallized. And Balaji had a lot to say about this as this stuff's going on. So I'll tell you a little bit about what Balaji has been talking about. So Balaji comes and says, he makes so he's referring to the SBF interview yesterday. And this was the part that really had him shocked. And I think a lot of people on the internet shocked today, because not only did SBF give the interview yesterday, he got a standing ovation. They clapped for him at the end, right? Think about that. think about what happened. Think about where it had to have gone wrong, right? For this guy to become an empathetic character that gets an ovation for, he's kind of a hero. Like he kind of risked it a bit, it didn't work out, oh, whoops. It's like the guy who he's getting treated like the guy who didn't land the jump in figure skating and just missed out on the gold medal. Like, whoops, oh, you were so close, buddy. We should feel sorry for you. So Balaji's commenting on the round of applause that SBF got, and he says, they want you fired for a tweet while they clap for a fraud. And then he says, remember, they don't really care if your crypto is stolen. They're more interested in stealing your crypto. And he has a link to a story about the Biden administration wanting to make it easier to seize crypto without criminal charges. So he goes in to tie the New York Times into the story in what I think is like, if people followed Balaji to the extent that he's still well known, but not everyone knows him. He's not like a household name. I think everyone in our industry certainly knows him, but he's not a household name by any means. But super smart guy. And if more people followed him and saw this tweet that he shared here, I think that would be the end of the New York Times. He says, unfortunately, we're all getting a taste of what the New York Times did to so many innocents abroad. The Ox Sulzberger employees. So Ox Sulzberger family is the one who started the New York Times, private company. We still don't know much about these people. They've been in charge forever. The young fella, he's only like 40 years old. He's in charge. It's the family dynasty. He's now in charge of the company. Another billionaire, right? Another billionaire in charge of another media operation who no one even knows about. So he says employees denied the Holodomor. That was the situation in Ukraine that was like a mass starvation Holocaust situation. So he denied the Holodomor, whitewashed Hitler, elevated Castro. They profited from abetting the genocide of millions. So covering up the fraud of billions is no big deal. And he was referring to David Marcus, who David Marcus used to be the Facebook Libra guy who was into the crypto thing, but now he's gone full Bitcoin, by the way. Well, I don't want to mention it now, but there's a pretty good chance. If you come to Miami, May 18th to 20th, you're going to hear more about what he's up to. Pretty good chance. That's for Bitcoin 2023, by the way. So David Marcus says, I watched the SBF interview, and all I have to say that I can't believe what I just witnessed. I'm speechless at the level of reality distortion. Right? He was speechless at the level of reality distortion. Balaji added to that, as we enter the 20th century, mass media centralized, so a few liars at the paper of record could fool millions. Our saving grace is that we're in the age of decentralization now. Social media lets all of us piece together a true story. So, and then Balaji, of course, points out that the jurisdiction, everyone's saying, oh, it's that was something handled on the interview. Oh, he's in Bahamas jurisdiction, so he's saying that's a bunch of shit. And then underlines how the Tornado Cash fella was in a foreign country, and it didn't matter. The Americans got him within days, right? Alexei Pertsev. So doesn't make any sense, right? So he's definitely underlying that. And finally, Matt Taibbi, who I think is one of the best journalists left in the game. He was with Rolling Stone for a long time. He's made it sort of his mission. He's definitely sort of a liberal left-wing guy, but he's made it his mission for years now and has been completely ostracized because he's been pointing out Trump derangement syndrome. So he is not a fan of Donald Trump by any stretch of the imagination. But what he says regularly is there's enough there to just criticize Trump about the things that are true. You don't have to hallucinate and make things up. You don't have to come up with new things that are not real in order to criticize him, right? Like, even look at this thing this weekend or this week with Nick Fuentes, right? This is a hallucination. It's a hallucination. Yeah, he went there, but there's a million. Now, we've talked about it a lot on the show. Trump handled it really poorly. He's, missing a step. He's lost a step. He's not as savvy, let's say, as he was. He's getting old, right? Let's all admit he's getting old, and so not as effective. Totally bungled it, but nevertheless, the hallucination is that they dined together and they're friends, and they like, it's not what happened, right? It was a hit job. Right, and he got a hit job. And so Matt Taibbi was known for pointing out hallucinations about Trump. Right, that was his main business. Right, he would come in and say, whenever you think you saw something that you believe is true about Trump, you got to come right back here and say, probably folks' delusion, privileged moment issue, and everything else flowed from that piece. So Matt Taibbi, title: Be it resolved, don't trust mainstream media. Now, we in Bitcoin have known that for a long time, but starting to get this pushed more into the mainstream is going to be a big help, right? A huge help. And what do we got here? Taibbi and Greenwald, solid old school investigative reporters, for sure. And what I think is amazing, now I brought it up when it was still just a trial episodes, Glenn Greenwald doing his Rumble show now. I mean, this could change reality. I mean, this is a big deal that Glenn Greenwald is doing this show every single day now. And I think he's going to, just with the practice of doing it every day, he's going to be able to really bend some minds and help smash narrative control, right? So when you start thinking about this narrative piece, here's a Terence McKenna quote, and it reminds me of this, right? Terence McKenna. You guys know what Terence McKenna is? Pretty big into the hallucinogenics scene, but really an ego death guy, right? So forget about the LSD and the mushrooms and the psilocybin for a second. Terence McKenna is really one of these ego death people, right? Who I think we all have to become more familiar with in the near term, because this is a big piece of what's changing, right? This ego death stuff. So here's his take on this. We are caged by our cultural programming. Culture is a mass hallucination. And when you step outside the mass hallucination, you see it for what it is worth, right? And that's what it comes down to. Bitcoin, with the SBF story, with everything we're seeing, is allowing more and more people to step out of the mass hallucination and see it clearly for what it is. Andrew Ross Sorkin is a drug-dealing hallucinator. That's the same thing, right? Terence McKenna is interested in what hallucinations do. Andrew Ross Sorkin deals drugs. This is drug dealing. He is a drug dealer. He sells dopamine, he sells confirmation bias, he sells all these things, right? And in the end, it serves the narrative. And here was the, I think, just great way to understand this. And this was from Balaji again, where Balaji says, oh no, sorry, this is from David Sachs, right? David Sachs quoting Matt Taibbi, right? David Sachs quoting Matt Taibbi. The story is no longer the boss. Instead, we sell narrative, right? So that's what Matt Taibbi was saying. That's the conclusion to his article, right? The story is no longer about journalists saying, oh, this person is doing wrong things and that person, we caught that person, da, da, da. No, it's not that. It's what Andrew Ross Sorkin is doing. It's what all the journalists in the Chinese Communist Party right now are doing to coordinate front page news of the death of Jiang Zemin. It's narrative control. Right? They're literally selling the narrative and making sure it stays consistent. Right? Making sure it stays consistent. George Stephanopoulos this morning, poor Mario Nawal this afternoon, right? He's going to try his best, right? He's going to try his best. The guy who gets people in spaces, Tiffany Fong yesterday, they're going to try their best, right? But it's going to allow SBF to say things like, oh, I did crypto media and I did mainstream media. I did everything, but no one's going to push them on things like we saw yesterday. What really happened yesterday that is so interesting about SBF's testimony? Well, he said, and this is where you're seeing the headlines, I gave to Republicans too. I gave to Republicans too. Okay. Which Republicans? He gave to uniparty Republicans. He gave to anti-Trump folks like the Speaker Mitch McConnell, to all the people that were directing resources not to get Blake Masters elected. Right? Blake Masters had no money in Arizona. We talked about Blake Masters a lot here, right? We talked about Blake Masters, nuclear energy, all those kinds of things, right? What ended up happening? Well, the money went to Alaska, $8 million or something like that, so that two Republicans who were running against each other, he would spend the money on that because one of them was a Trump person, right? So he didn't want the Trump person there. So it was all anti-Trump stuff. So SBF certainly did give money to both parties. He only gave it to Republicans who hated Trump, right? The people who did the January 6th thing, right? Oh, all those January 6th hearings, Adam Kinzinger, what's that one? Her dad was the vice president, just terrible. All these people who are running the January 6th things, which was, narrative control again, received money from SBF. So now the headlines are, he gave to both parties, right? But no one pressed him. Do you think Andrew Ross Sorkin was like, oh, but this is but you said you give it to both, but this is clearly the uniparty folks. Like any conservative, any Trump supporter, anyone who wants to blow the thing up would have said the same thing, right? These are rhinos, they call them, Republican in name only. These are the anti-Trump people. So it was certainly about narrative control. They've allowed SBF now to go on record as being, oh, I was not a Democrat donor. I was not a big Democrat backer. I backed everybody. I just wanted to buy influence. It's just influence. It doesn't matter, right? What do they call it? I saw a great name for it. It was Stick, Sex, and Hammer who underlined it today. It's called, where was it? Where did he put it? Favor catering, right? They make it sound like it's just favor catering, that he was doing favor catering. Like, oh, if I just pay everyone. That was the entire hallucination that we saw from the interview yesterday. Oh, I was Republicans and Democrats. I just had to give money, and then I knew it would be safe, and I can get what I needed, and they wouldn't go after me. Well, that's convenient because it makes all the money laundering stuff from Ukraine just disappear. Now, I don't know if there's any proof of money laundering in Ukraine at all. I don't know. But it looks like there is. But we're not even talking about it, right? No one's even talking about it because it's poor fella lost his money and gambled a little too hard. Oh, whoops, right? He's embattled, right? It sucks. He lost the support of his followers, they've said, right? He lost the support of his followers. He didn't. It's not that he defrauded them. He lost the support of his followers. It's okay, right? So remember, the way to tell if there's spin or not, or if you're part of the narrative or not, is if there is a hallucination there. If you're being asked to imagine something that just wasn't there, right? This bipartisan political donations is not there. It's not even close. It's not even close. It's a hallucination. Right? A hallucination. And in the end, that's where the cognitive closure is always directed towards, right? Once you get them on this path and induce the hallucination here, very easy to tie it all up in the end and sink it back into the narrative, right? That's how it works. That's how persuasion works. That's how brainwashing works. It's not that hard, right? Unfortunately, I wish it was harder, but it is pretty easy. Daniel Renault, Taibbi and Greenwald saw, Russell Brand interviewed Taibbi the other day. Yeah, Russell Brand is great. That's another person we got to get to. That's another person we got to get to Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, May 18th to 20th. McTimmy says, the pious man will be thought mad, the impious wise. Frenzied will be thought brave, the worst criminal a good man. And from our beautiful person who I mention often on the show, the lament of Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes thrice great. Yes, indeed. We talked about the Hermetic faith the other day and Hermes' main principles. And look, this is known by a lot of folks. And what I'm sharing here is not, I didn't invent this stuff. This is all me just sharing what a lot of people know and a lot of people I know use effectively, right? So that's what it comes down to. Oh yeah, Launderfest 2022 is yesterday. Yeah, exactly. Launderfest 2022 is yesterday. Yeah, it's just forget. It's finished. They're going to be okay with it. So there it is. All right, team. Join us at 1 o'clock today. I'll be doing news and notes on Bitcoin Magazine, and I will also be doing the Ansel Linder FedWatch show at 1:30. So you can see me again for a whole hour this afternoon. Come join. It'll be fun. We'll have more coffee. It'll be good. All right, team.